stars.
4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Produce Your Own Life podcast. Life is a script. It's time to write your story. Welcome your host, actor, director, producer, writer, and author of the recently released book, Shattered, A Journey Through the Pieces, the man who inspires millions through storytelling and interviews. The one, the only, Rodney Damon. Thank you for listening.
Everybody, we are live at Haunted Dreams Effects Studios, and who I have standing with me is none other than special makeup effects artist Michael Dinetz, who has worked on incredible movies such as Infinity Wars, projects like Grimm, and what else was there?
Worked on Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow.
Lost in Space.
Lost in Space.
Worked for Disney Imagineering.
Disney Imagineering.
Now, we should be clear. I was a little cog in a big machine on these projects.
Well, to me, there is no little cog in what we do. Everybody plays an incredible role in making sure the production comes together. He is also a film producer, and we're going to talk about that right now. So, stay with us. All right. So, Michael, just, tell us your journey in creating your own studio and moving out from New Jersey and becoming this incredible special makeup effects artist.
All right. The journey. So, I always knew I wanted to do something in the arts. I always knew. From way back then. And I told everybody. I told everybody I would be an artist from like the age of 6. You get your eye rolls. Everybody grows up and becomes a lawyer and an accountant.
Yeah.
I started taking animation classes when I was 12, and I really thought I wanted to be an animator. Mm-hmm. I love 70s and 80s hand-run animation. That's one of my favorite things, and that's the kind of stuff I wanted to do, and it just was not the way the industry was going.
Okay.
So, 17 rolled around, I graduated high school, my parents were like, well, you got to pick something for college, so I had to sort of pivot. I was like, this is just not going to be my journey, and I discovered a program at the Art Institute of Philadelphia, which is sadly no longer with us after the whole Art Institute scandal. But I discovered a program there called Industrial Design Technology. And industrial design covers a lot of things. It covers product design. Everything you can hold in your hands and buy in a store has pretty much passed through the hands of a designer in some capacity. Mm-hmm. It covers packaging and toys and exhibit displays. And, we learned how to build furniture and use power tools and, classes in sculpture and life drawing. But we had 2 classes in what they referred to as special effects. Obviously, what I do is properly called special makeup effects. A lot of people mislabel it as special effects.
Like me.
Real movie special effects people are the people that do explosions and squibs and pyro and wind and rain and dust and snow and Slime You at Nickelodeon. That's their realm.
Okay.
And I certainly don't want to take their credit, nor would I expect them to take mine. I think they're due their fair share of credit. But a lot of people mislabel it, and that's what they called it. And these were 2 required courses, and I just fell in love. I took 2 more electives. I had a great teacher named John Stewart, who was a local Philly area effects artist, graduate of the Dick Smith program.
No relation to Green Lantern.
No relation to Green Lantern. Okay. He was a white guy with a mullet.
Okay. Although things change. Green Lantern can have a mullet nowadays.
I shudder to think. Green Lantern should never have a mullet. I would just lose all respect for the Green Lantern Corps if we had a Green Lantern with a mullet. I'm sorry. Huge Green Lantern fan. That can't happen. John was a great dude. I will say that, not to throw my fellow students under the bus, but a lot of students didn't really take the course seriously. They were there to learn how to make iPhones, which was not a thing back then, back in 2000, but they were there to learn how to make consumer products and, sort of muddled through some of these peripheral area courses. In fact, I think I'm only one of 2 graduates of that program at that school that works in the industry. The other one is Jeremy Sellenfriend, based out of the New York, New Jersey area, department heading the most recent season of American Horror Story New York.
Which I've auditioned for numerous times. Call it, brother.
Well, the phenomenal Erin Kruger McCash has sort of been in charge of American Horror Story's makeup since the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And she was then granted the honor of being a producer on the show by the great Brian Murphy. But she still continued to steer that.
Yes.
But they shot New York proper, union project. You need union artists to run the show.
Yeah.
And Jeremy was given the illustrious task. He runs a cool little studio called Monster in My Closet on the East Coast, and I love him, and he's phenomenally talented.
All right.
But yeah, he was the only other person to come into that program and enter the film industry and do makeup effects work. You know, I dislike the fact that our course materials were dumbed down a little bit to accommodate the lazy students.
Yeah.
I sort of wish I got a more proper foundation. That's all right. You know, I ran my course out. I got my bachelor's. I moved out to LA. I went to what many would have considered the illustrious Joe Blasco Makeup Studio West. There's a very mixed opinion on makeup schools in our industry. Graduates of different schools have very strong opinions on other schools as well as their own. Joe himself is still with us. He's still alive, so far as I know, but these schools no longer exist. He had 2 locations, and the very last one shut down, I think, about a year or 2 before the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
You know, he always claimed he was the first in makeup education. He was not, but he was early.
Yeah.
Really interesting thing about Glasgow schools, the test you used to have to take to graduate was the union test.
Yeah.
That's a little before my time. I graduated in 2004. So I've been doing this for about 18 years now. I stuck around. I you know, did what everybody does. I started calling around looking for work. Our industry's all freelance. I started calling the workshops. You know, I think when I got into this, I thought I'd just be able to come out here, get a job at Stan Winston's, and call it a day.
Don't we all think that?
Well, there was a time when you could do that.
Yeah.
That time has passed us. They don't have what's called the lifers anymore. You know,
Okay.
the people that stay at one workshop for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be you'd have 2 years, a year, you know, 6 months to prep a project. And on the bigger ones, you still get some semblance of that.
Yeah.
But the deadlines have changed. The budgets have changed. It's a lot more moving around from workshop to workshop. You might do a long stint at a shop, but the only people that seem to stay really long term are department heads. You know, the mold shop supervisor, casting supervisor, paint supervisor, handful, you know, whoever's running the office.
Yes.
It's just different nowadays, and they weren't hiring, and I couldn't get any work, and you know, I just started trying to take on small projects myself, and as my resume built with, you know, key department head,
Yes.
it just kept going. You know, I've worked at other people's workshops. First time was in 2006, working for Larry Bones at Boneyard Effects on Halloween Horror Nights. I ran the mold shop for 2 years on that. Then we parted ways. No more on that. I worked for a wonderful artist named Jeff Farley at his company Obscure Artifacts, which I don't think is still in operation. You know, I spent some time over at Barney Berman's studio, B2 Effects, which I'm also not sure if that's still open. I know Barney was talking about going a different direction.
Okay.
Very talented. Hollywood effects royalty. His father, Tom Berman, is a legend in the industry.
You know, don't lose this, but I just wanted to, one of the key principles of my podcast is taking personal accountability and taking personal ownership. And what I heard you when you were talking, you did one of the most important things I tell people to do is that if you're out there, whatever you're trying to do, you got to eventually get to the point where you take ownership and you got to say, you know what, I need to start getting base hits. You know, World Series going on right now. In order to get a base hit, I got to have something that people want to come after me for. And that's when you started, you know, starting your production, started creating your work, and started having people come to your door for smaller projects. So I call that as hitting singles, you know. And you learn how to hit singles in baseball, you're pretty successful. So I'm pretty sure that's success.
What's that old phrase? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
I think that's how a lot of the studios started.
Yeah.
In one essence, the effects studios. Tom's, I think, was the first studio formally outside the studio system, an independent location off a studio lot.
Okay.
He was the first sort of proper warehouse style effects shop.
Yeah.
You know, the giant mega studio. Rick Baker, who is probably many of our idols, credits Stan Winston with taking makeup effects out of the garage.
Okay.
You know, there's plenty of garage studios still around. I think, you know, that's where we came from.
Yes.
John Chambers' workshop after he left the studio lot was out of his garage. That's where the ears for Star Trek were made.
Okay.
Leonard Nimoy's ears. And many other interesting things. That's where he did some of his work for the CIA, which we wouldn't know about until, you know, a few decades ago.
Yeah, or do you have to kill you? You said CIA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he did a lot of mask and disguise work for the CIA back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, if he told you, he had to kill you.
Supposedly, this was the first use of silicone for prosthetics.
Really?
Supposedly. It would have been more primitive silicones. It would have been things that are not necessarily advisable to use on your skin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, tin condensation cure based silicones, which we try to steer clear of today.
Yes.
Both in my field and the medical field. But yeah, he was pioneering crazy stuff, and nobody knew about it until like the late 90s.
Really?
That's when it was sort of okay to talk about.
After all the little
John was like one
of
of the big names out here on the West Coast. You had your in so many ways it was like the rap game. You had your West Coast and you had your East Coast.
Was there any West Coast East Coast beef?
I often wonder, and I don't know that we'll ever get a straight answer to that.
Okay.
I don't know that we'll ever get a straight answer to that. But I do wonder, and I've wondered for years. And then there's the U.S. versus U.K.
Yes.
You know, at this time you had a handful of pioneers. You had the Westmore family. You know, all the brothers. Bud Westmore ran Universal's makeup department at the time. I think there were 5 brothers, and you had Chambers, who, if my memory is correct, was over at Fox. Each studio had sort of like a makeup department head, and on the East Coast, the big pioneer was Dick Smith. Dick is considered the godfather of makeup effects. He pioneered a lot of materials and formulas and processes that we still use today.
Okay.
You know, they've been, I'm not going to say improved upon, they've evolved a bit, but they're still very much what he came up with.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people today, and I whine all the time about the beginners on the groups online. You know, the sort of millennial attitude of give me all the answers. Oh, there's no makeup effects store in my area, or, you know, one complaint after another. And all I can think of is these early guys, you know, buying stuff from medical companies and industrial supply houses and figuring it out on their own. You know, schools were not a thing. You had to play with stuff and theorize and hypothesize.
Yeah. And
it was just not the accessible thing that it is today. And I listen to these kids and they're just like, oh, life is hard, I don't know. And I'm like, you gotta put your big person, you know, I want to be gender appropriate here, your big person pants on.
Yeah.
And go do the work.
Yes.
And I just, that really gets under my skin.
Yeah.
There's a big community of that today.
I saw your post yesterday. It'll have me cracking up that somebody actually had the nerve to ask you to just give them some money to go to acting school. It was like,
yeah, you know, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that coming out of Africa and certain Asian countries. In the global film groups.
Yes.
You know, they'll post and be like, please finance my camera. I'm poor and live in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And like, get it. I get it,
Yeah.
You know, exchange rates, and there's no Ethiopian brands of 4K cameras and 8K cameras. I get that.
Yes.
Not oblivious to that.
Yeah.
Just because you want something doesn't mean the world has to financially support you.
No.
You know, we all hustle. You know, I'm blessed after 18 years that I don't have to panic the day a job ends as to where I'm going to get rent money. You know, it's still a concern, but it's not panic anymore. It's, I can take, you know, a couple weeks, maybe a month off and just relax. You know, we're always hunting for the next thing.
Constantly.
But I'm no longer in that crunch mode that we start out in, and some people are perpetually in.
Yes.
I know people that have lived in that space for 30 years.
Well, that's a hard place to be for 30 years.
The one area I think in this business that's really lacking, I can't speak for every aspect of the industry, but in my field, what's really lacking, even at the formal institutions to some degree as well, is business education. People will tell you and teach you and take you by the hand and show you how to do a bruise and a cut and lay down a piece of rubber. But when it comes to your rights, you know, who's an employee, who's an independent contractor, what you're owed, what you're not owed, budgeting and managing your taxes and saving for a rainy day, it's just not taught.
No, it isn't.
I was extremely blessed to have a father who is still around. I don't want to mislead anybody by using past tense words. My dad's fine and he's healthy.
Hi, Dad.
My father gave me a really good education growing up on aspects of business. And that definitely had a positive impact on my career. And I think, at least for me, some of it's intuitive. You know, some of it I taught myself, and some of it's learned through hard lessons. But this is not a foundationary thing that you get at the formal institutions. Not really. They sort of gloss over resumes and business cards and stuff like that.
The stuff that actually helps you make a living.
But how to keep going once you are going, that's trickier. And it's something that's always frustrated me because, like, yes, you have to know how to do a bruise and glue down a piece of rubber, but all of that is for naught if you can't keep yourself afloat.
I agree. And leverage your relationships. You know, when you're working a project, that could lead to your next project.
Yes, which is where the old adage is treat everybody well and treat everybody the same. You don't know when that PA is going to be directing a project and they're going to call you, and I've had that happen. You must treat those around you with respect when you're on a production. You know, I don't care if somebody's a PA. I don't care if they're the AC or, you know, the lowest grip on the G&E totem pole. Everybody is there to contribute, and they deserve, if nothing else, the benefit of the doubt.
You know, I don't care what anybody says. It doesn't cost anything to be nice.
It actually costs about $5.50 an hour.
You hear that? $5.50 an hour, which is kind of low paying for whatever part of the country you live in. But still.
Oh no, that's like your per diem. That's not.
Oh, your per diem. Okay. Oh, so
yeah, it's like meal penalties. It's extra. It's on top of things.
Okay, now we gotta break down meal penalties.
We went down a rabbit hole. That is my fault. That is my fault.
People will be like, "What are our meal penalty?" Let's go ahead. Let's talk about meal penalties real quick on productions.
Bane of people's existence. Meal penalties are when the production decides that they're going to have to shoot through lunch and they pay you extra money. This is far more common on a union production. Big productions that just have to get the footage to the editors because you see this a lot in TV. Because, and I get it, but I also don't get it. Network TV starts shooting, and then they start releasing episodes before the last episode is shot and edited.
That's stress.
It is. My personal feeling is it's not necessary. There is another way, but I don't think that's ever going to change. You see a lot of the streamers, you know, where they're releasing everything at once. They shoot it like a movie. Nothing hits the screen until the last bit is through post. And I sort of feel like that's the wiser way to go. And that's how movies are made.
I agree.
But C'est la vie. I don't make the rules in this industry. I just get to complain about stuff. And complain I shall. Everybody does.
I want to thank you guys for continuing to stay with us as we are enjoying this conversation with special makeup artist Michael Dinetz. We will be right back. Don't you leave. All right, everybody. We are back right now. I am enjoying my conversation. Hopefully you guys are enjoying with Hollywood special makeup artist Michael Dinetz. And let's get back to our conversation we were talking about.
Yes, what were we talking about? I'm old and forget things.
Yeah, we're talking about we talked about meal penalties.
Meal penalties.
Yeah.
Yeah, meal penalties. That's been a big topic of conversation amongst my crowd lately. That 18-hour days and all this other stuff. It's all network TV.
Yes.
You don't see it nearly as much on features. Network TV is the main. I don't do a lot of network TV jobs. Yeah. I don't like the timetables. We need something ridiculously complicated, and we need it 6 days from now. Some of the workshops and artists in town really specialize in this and made a name for themselves in this. One that comes to mind is Matthew Mungle, who has since shut down his workshop WM Creations and moved to Texas, I think. I think he's in Austin now.
Oh, really?
He's not really retired, but he had a big workshop in town for many, many, many years. They did CSI, and he won an Oscar for the makeup on James Woods in Ghost of the Mississippi. He also was part of the Oscar-winning team on Bram Stoker's Dracula. He did the applications of the prosthetic makeups for Greg Cannon, who was the designer on that, and is a legend in their industry. Matthew was famous for, if everybody else in town turned you down because of some ridiculous deadline, he would take the job. And he would deliver. He always delivered, every single time.
Wow.
I remember hearing stories. He did Lee Daniels, the butler, and there were all these likeness makeups, and he did some of them in like 3 days. And the rest of us were just like, you know what, you're welcome to it. Because I don't need that kind of stress. I just don't need that kind of stress.
That sounds like a lot right there.
But yeah, Matthew would just pull it out of his butt and deliver every single time. And my hat is off to somebody that can do that, because I'm the first person to tell you when you call and you want like a full multiple piece prosthetic makeup in 3 days. I'm like, I can't help you.
No way.
Like, the amount I would have to charge you is not worth continuing this conversation. We're going to have to work around the clock. I'm going to have to hire 20 people.
You can't afford me, is what you're saying.
I'm just
playing.
A lot of people would say that.
Yeah.
And I don't like to think that way, because I think it comes across as egotistical.
Yeah.
So I tell people they can't afford what they want.
That is a much better way to say it. You can't afford what you want.
Because it's not about me. It's about the 5, 10, 20 other people that are going to be working for me.
Yeah.
It's about how long it takes for rubber and resin and plaster to set up. It's about how long it takes to, sculpt or paint something.
Yes.
The guys at SNL, headed up by the amazing Louis Zakarian, do this every single week. And those guys are the real MVPs. And half of it doesn't play. Half the time the sketch will get cut.
Yeah.
But they'll do a political likeness makeup with a custom wig, and they'll do it in 3 days. I once saw them do an Incredible Hulk suit in 3 days. Now, I don't want to put this work on par with like what you're going to see in a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But I have to say, what they achieve in a handful of days is impressive. Isn't enough. Louis is so talented. And I don't even know where he finds time to sleep. And then he'll do other projects besides SNL.
Really?
I think he's got to have been at SNL for 25, 30 years now at this point. But he also did the Pentaveret with Mike Myers recently. And, he'll bounce around and he'll do movies. I don't know where he finds the time. My hat is off to him. It's very impressive.
Man, I want to ask you, while we're talking about these wonderful projects, have you had a project where you maybe hit some snags, and how did you handle it? I know
we
you had
probably hit some form of a snag on every project. Usually they're small.
Okay, where even the talent messes up the mold.
Well, don't get me started on actors. We won't talk about actors today. No, a batch of material doesn't cure right. Somebody's really tired and mixes 2 part A's together, and that's why it didn't cure right. Any number of things goes wrong. Somebody drops a mold and it breaks in half, or what have you. I've seen just about anything that can go wrong, and the first thing I will say is a good department head never panics. Panicking doesn't solve problems. It doesn't bring back the thing that went wrong. All we can do is move forward. So the first thing I usually jump to is how do we solve the problem? That's very important.
You just said something very profound too. I want people to listen to that. Do not panic.
Never panic.
Whatever you're dealing with in life is like the most important thing is like, okay, acknowledge what happened. Okay, now how are we going to remedy? How are we going to solve the problem? You can't worry about what just happened 2 minutes ago. It's over.
No, you can't.
Let's fix it.
It's sad. It's frustrating. There could be thousands of dollars down the drain. That is what it is. Going back to the business aspect, things like this should be covered in your contract.
Is there insurance you can get, like, as a
there's
film
no
producer?
There's no insurance that covers a stupid mistake. There's no insurance that covers a factory defect.
Okay.
You put clauses in your contract that you can't be held financially responsible for stuff like that. Okay. That's about as far as it goes. There's no insurance in the world that covers that, though. And it's, we also usually, if we're smart, put a buffer in our budget to cover stuff like that.
Got you. So,
I've had people
about 5% margin or so.
I once went down this road where a producer wanted me to give them an itemized material budget with quantities.
Oh boy.
And he's like, well, the other guy did. I said, let me see it. And this person had been like, we need exactly 5 ounces of silicone and 3 ounces of adhesive. And I'm like, dude, one, you can't even purchase materials in these quantities. I wanted to say even numbers only. You can't purchase materials in these quantities. I was like, I can't bill you this way. I'm going to lose money on leftover material.
Yeah.
Just because it's not your movie doesn't mean it's going to get used on the next job. It'll go bad, and I'm out money. That's not how we do business. I always tell artists, if you need half an eyeshadow, you bill for a whole eyeshadow. Okay. It's really that simple. And I was like, I don't owe you this, because the first thing a producer wants with an itemized list is they want to go see if you're lying about the price and if they can find it for cheaper. And then try to buy it for you. I said, if there's no element of trust, we cannot work together.
I love it.
Ironically, that project ended up, as I understand, becoming somewhat of a disaster. But no fault of my own, luckily. At the end of the day, I don't do that. I don't play games with productions.
Yeah.
You're going to accept that we're going to give you a bid.
Yes.
I'll happily break it down between lab cost and set cost, between materials and labor, and that's as far as I'm willing to go.
Okay.
And I will work with you on those numbers. I'm damn flexible for the productions I work on, but there's a limit.
Wow. And one thing I'm just looking around here, which we're going to show you guys some of the cool pieces in a little bit, but there's, from what I'm kind of gleaning, is that there's no specific price amount. Like each project varies. You've never had a project where you can go, I used this price point last time. You can't do that.
Especially with materials shooting up the way they have. I remember literally 2 years ago, I could get a box of water clay for about $15, and it is now close to $30.
Inflation.
Inflation. I've never seen inflation like this. I really haven't. I've had stuff shoot up, 20, 30, 40, 50%. It is what it is. It's just frustrating. So
filmmakers, when you're looking to have a special makeup artist, effects artist, you have to realize that whatever's happening in the economy is definitely going to dictate what you got to spend in supplies on top of the labor.
Well, the economy, unforeseen disasters. I'm not going to make much in the way of political comments, but
Yeah.
Texas, in its infinite wisdom to have its own power grid, screwed the petroleum industry.
Yeah.
Every resin and about 50% of the synthetic rubbers on the market are petroleum derivatives. Our resin supply got hamstrung. Half the time you couldn't even get stuff, and when you could, prices had gone up significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And we use all kinds of differences. I was using synthetic rubbers for the work I did on Star Trek Picard. We were skinning all the stunt weapons with it.
Everybody hear that?
That was really cool. I got to work in season 3 doing
Yeah.
stunt weapons. To do a couple of interesting hero pieces.
Oh,
Our resins, our synthetic foams, it all went up. Some of the vendors are offering price decreases now, which is very nice.
Yeah.
But a lot of stuff went up, and a lot of it's not coming back down. We had a silicon raw component shortage about 5 years ago
Yes.
because the manufacturers were trying to make more than they could make.
Mm-hmm.
And that has permanently shot silicone up about 30-40% from where it was about 5 years ago.
Okay. We're gonna hold real quick. We got a helicopter and just decided to fly in our airspace.
Yeah, that's for me because I'm on the run right now.
He's got a helicopter gonna pick him up.
Yeah, I'm on the lam right now. That's Tommy Lee Jones coming to get me.
Yes.
We also The Fugitive. What was the sequel to The Fugitive?
Passenger 57. No.
It's the one with Wesley Snipes.
Wesley Snipes. Yeah, because he chased Harrison
U.S.
Ford.
Marshals.
Yeah, U.S. Marshal. He chased Harrison Ford in the first one, the second one he chased Wesley Snipes.
U.S.
U.S. Marshals.
So,
U.S.
yeah.
Marshals are pretty good too.
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Watched that a couple of times.
I love those type of movies. I actually miss those kind.
I do. They don't make movies like
No.
that. The movies of my childhood are just gone. You know, the sword
Air
and
Force
sorcery
One.
movies.
Oh yeah, Sorcerer. All that stuff is gone.
It's, they're still trying. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
And after Guy Ritchie tried to do Robin Hood, it was all downhill from there.
Rest in peace. I'll pour out one for him.
Guy Ritchie. Ruining one movie at a time.
Yes.
Such dedication. It's hard. There's a lot of things that go sideways. So and the simple answer is I tell every producer every production is a baby.
Yeah.
I do the same thing on the development work I do. Every production is different. There's also sometimes there really isn't multiple ways to skin a cat, as the expression goes. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's 50 ways to tackle an effect. But sometimes, there's kind of like, this is the way that's going to give you the shot the way it was in the script, and everything else is not. It varies. I will always give producers choices.
Yes.
I will always try to work with you to keep something cost effective, especially on much smaller, micro budget projects. I understand there's constraints.
Yes.
I talk with a lot of filmmakers and effects artists around the country and around the world, and I think there's this idea that in Hollywood money rains from the sky, and that could not be further from the truth.
Very far.
For every, I hate the term passion project. People making $100 million movies are plenty passionate about their movie.
I would say so.
I think that's a horrible expression.
Yeah.
I think it's a really glitzed and glammed up way to say that you just tried to make your movie with insufficient money.
Mm-hmm.
I constantly butt heads with filmmakers over this. Like, nobody put a gun to your head and said, make the movie today.
No.
This is you placing your desire to be behind a camera today above delivering the great script that is on the page. And that's an impasse that I don't think is ever going to get overcome between crew people and producers.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do certain things. I will try to present them. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, everything you bring to me needs a Jurassic Park budget.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. But there's a breaking point. You can only stretch dollars so far. And there's a lot of people out there, effects artists and producers, that either don't want to learn that, don't want to acknowledge it, or haven't learned it yet.
Okay.
I think it's an easy lesson to learn, and you don't have to learn it the hard way.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people insist on learning it the hard way, and that for me is very sad because it's not necessary. It ends in tears and late rent checks.
Yeah.
Um,
Which are not good.
I cannot state enough how there are certain artists in my field that are not math wizards, and they under budget the hell out of things time after time after time, which is why they remain broke well into old age.
Which is not good.
I think there's a lot of psychology that people don't know about when it comes to artists, both in my industry and not. Artists have a major guilt complex. I think a lot of them feel bad charging what they're worth, and I hate that expression, because it's not just about your worth as an individual. It's about the hard cost. I can't stress this enough. We have hard cost, and as much as it pains me to say it, 80% of it goes in the trash. It's a temporary process to get to the next process.
Okay.
What shows up on set is a fraction of the materials used. Yes, the molds are typically left over, but there's what's called waste molds.
Yes.
There's mold flashing, the excess material that squeezes at the side to give you that thin little edge or seam line. There's so many things. There's the clay. I'm not bringing the clay to set. There's all this stuff, layers of release agent, you name it.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
As a filmmaker myself, do you ever consult, like, while people are writing the script, if they're going over, hey, this is a scene and I'm putting together, this is what I really want to happen. What do you think?
I do.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure there would be some type of fee associated with that.
Well, there should be.
Okay.
I think there's an expectation.
You don't have to say the exact fee because they don't need to hear that.
Well, just call me flexible.
Okay.
There was a time when it was just accepted that you were going to do a bid for a project or you were going to consult on a project, and it would be understood that costs something.
Yes.
In the world of the lower budget side of independent production, I've had producers and directors be offended that you would ask for payment. They would be, if not offended, they would be surprised. There's this idea that just goes part and parcel for you trying to get the job, that you have to run numbers, that you have to have unpaid meetings to get to the root of how to do this. And the number of times a producer will go to one vendor for an education and then hire somebody else, it happens all the time. There's a very limited sense of loyalty.
Yeah.
There's a very limited sense of sort of that ethical acknowledgement that work was done, that time was taken. Very few people come to an effects artist, or at least to me, while they're writing and say, hey, is this going to cost us a fortune? I'm happy to answer those questions.
Yes.
It doesn't happen very often. I've had people consult after a draft is done while they're trying to raise money, so that they know what to put in their budget. And I think that this is great, and it's also terrible. And I have to go back to not everybody in my industry is a math whiz.
Yes.
And not all of them should be running their own business.
Yes.
You as the producer take it on faith that the number we give you is reliable. Some people are going to lowball out of desperation because they think you'll get them the job, not even remotely realizing that the movie is going to be funded like 2 years from now.
Yeah.
Some of them just pull numbers out of their butts, assuming that they're enough. I can tell you some stories, but I won't.
Wow.
Because I'd have to leave a lot of names out.
To protect the innocent. Or not innocent.
Or the guilty.
Yeah, the guilty.
Perhaps the unintentionally victimized, shall we say.
Unintentionally victimized.
A lot of people in my industry will let the client walk all over them. I think some feel that it's their obligation to just say yes to whatever the client wants. I know that some of the schools drum that in.
Yeah.
Always find a way to please the director. Just give production what they want, at any cost. I don't know that it's phrased that way, but it definitely sinks in that way. You don't want to be the person that rocks the boat. And I finally hit a point, and we're going back a number of years, where I had an AD, for those unaware, an assistant director, say to me, just tell me no. Tell me if I can't have something. Tell me if you can't do this in a frame of time I can work with.
Yes.
And you can extrapolate that advice to budgeting. There is no harm, contrary to what you may believe, in telling a producer they can't have what they came to you for. I can't give you a fully haired, sculpted, molded, cast werewolf suit for $5,000. I just can't. It doesn't cover my hard cost. I will make no money on the labor. I will not be able to pay anybody. And it's a team effort on something that large. That is not something that you one-man band.
There are certain stores you can go buy a cheap-looking costume for that.
Yes, there are. For less, sadly. And that's sort of where your budget is.
Yeah.
Now, I tell a lot of people it's sort of a retail mentality to
Yeah.
a custom job. And one of my favorite analogies, there's two analogies I use. One is the automotive analogy. You walk into a dealership and you want to buy a Honda Accord. It's probably about $30K right now.
Mm-hmm.
You walk into Honda's headquarters with a bunch of drawings and say, I have, money's no object. I want this car.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to pay probably north of $5 million because that one unit bears all of the molding cost, the digital rendering cost, the engineering, the wiring design, all of it. Whereas when you're making 100,000 plus Accords,
Mm-hmm.
you amortize that cost across everything. And it's just two very different things. I also have people to be like, well, I didn't know what it cost. I'm like, I mean this with love, that's not my fault. It costs what it costs. You have now backed yourself into a corner, committing to an entire crew to shoot this production, and you have arbitrarily decided that this was enough money. They say, well, this is what we have. And I'm like, you would never walk into a high-end steakhouse, order, a Delmonico ribeye,
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of high-end sides, your truffle mac and cheese, your, $100 bottle of wine.
Now he's making me hungry.
Apologies. And when they bring the check for like $300 or $400, and you're like, well, I got 40. Like, that's just not how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no person on this planet that has an expectation that you could even pull that off.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow, some way, it has become a common thought that you can do that in the arts. That everything is flexible to an infinite degree.
Mm-hmm.
And while a lot of us are willing to flex on labor, I can't control what my supplier is going to charge me for a box of clay and a gallon of rubber. It's going to be what it's going to be, and you have to absorb that cost because this thing is for you, and only for you.
Yeah, that's a lot to consider. And with that being said, we're going to take a quick break. Make sure you stay with us. We'll be right back with Michael Dinetz. I said it right? See, I messed up. Time out again. Dinetz. I just looked again. I looked at the board. Everybody, this is a lesson. Reading is fundamental. If I had looked at the board, Michael has it written up properly for me to say it properly. So, we'll be right back with Michael Dinetz, our lovely conversation about the special makeup artist world. All right, everybody, we are back right now with Michael Dinetz as we are talking about special makeup effects and the whole world that exists. When you watch those movies, you watch those TV shows, and you see those different things happening to people.
Secret world of movie magic.
Yeah. And what we have in front of us right here, this belongs to a very handsome gentleman. He had to go through this process. A very talented actor by the way of Rodney Damon Collins. This is actually me, people. Michael, let's talk about this.
This is your neck, cast up in plaster.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we started the process of making your neck prosthetic. And the air bladders that we put under it for Quinn Bailey's Played All Night Long.
Coming soon. Yeah.
This is how it starts. We slathered you in silicone and plaster bandage, and then we cast this out of that life cast mold.
Wow.
And this is the basis for which we did your prosthetic. We laid it down on the table. We built it out with clay to make the forms sort of more conducive to our process.
Yes.
Having a shape like this, you get what's called an undercut. If I try to make a single piece mold around it, the two would lock together because it goes around like this. I wouldn't be able to open it. So we flare that out, in all directions to make it easier. And then we ended up with this.
All right, which we're gonna show you guys. This beauty right here.
So as you can see, this has been used.
All right, here we go. See, I even know which way to put it.
Little residual bits of foam latex on here.
All
So
right.
this shape allows us, as you saw, to open and close the mold. It means our negative mold can be one piece instead of having a seam line that we have to eliminate.
Wow.
So we do this a lot of times. We'll do it with everything from chins and noses to necks to torsos. You know, if you've ever seen somebody laid out on an operating table on a set with like all their guts exposed and stuff.
Yeah.
Usually it's a prosthetic that goes from about here to here, out to about here, and they'll do the same process with the whole torso.
Boy.
This stuff is some of my favorite stuff on the planet. This is called AdTech Epoxy Syntactic Dough. This was developed in the 70s for the Space Shuttle program for NASA.
Boy.
And it made its way over to our industry, I believe, in the early 90s for mold making applications. It does not warp. It does not degrade. I could pull 1,000 prosthetics out of this with no degradation.
Uh-huh.
It can take more pressure than anything I've ever seen, which gives us that nice feathery thin blending edge.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's very expensive.
I was going to say, like, how much would this cost?
Aside from what it took to get us to this,
Yes.
what you see in front of you is about $2,000 worth of material.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yes. I love this stuff. We do not use it for everything.
Yeah, this
I do love
is incredible. I'm just like, that.
And it's a lot lighter than plaster. Still got some heft to it, but it's lighter than plaster. Probably be about double this weight if it were plaster.
And you put these bars back here. This is like for ease of picking up.
Yeah,
I thought it was something else, behind it.
Well, a lot of people would tell you, and it's much more important, honestly, with something like a plaster mold or certain other materials than it is with this stuff.
Yeah.
When we compress it, it keeps extra pressure off the sides, so you get an even compression. But this stuff is like bulletproof. So here it's mainly just a hold, and when we open the mold, we do a technique where we actually take some wood boards over the top of the mold, and we'll insert clamps into these, and we'll literally lift it up.
Oh boy.
Yeah. That's a technique that's been in use for decades.
And that's the neck right there, a part of it?
So this is, these are prosthetics that came out of the molds. These are some reject castings from early on.
All right.
But I saved them just in case.
Okay.
Sometimes you're in a pinch, you gotta use the rejects.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love this baby.
I'm like looking at.
You could drive over this with a car.
And it would not break. It might break the car though.
It won't break the car, but you'd be just fine.
Pickles, you okay back there?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Pickles.
Everybody, you may not see, but we have a lovely friend back here, Pickles. How you doing, Pickles? Pickles is a part of our interview too. Pickles has been an employee of the studio since its inception.
This is our shop supervisor.
Shop
And
supervisor.
she does a great job. She does a great job.
So, I don't want to take all these up because they're so
Take
heavy.
out whatever you like.
Okay, let me see. What is this? What is this?
So
This
that's-
looks like a baby.
It is.
Really?
So we had to do a melting baby, old school Indiana Jones style melt, for a dream nightmare sequence on a project I did. I guess that was around the beginning of this year. Actually, it might have been the middle of last year. How time flies. So this is what's referred to as a negative only mold, meaning there's no core inside. There's no counterbalance. Like this is what's referred to as a core, whereas this is the negative. The negative holds the sculpture. The core holds the shape, in this case of an actor. If we were going to core this, it would be to control the thickness of a skin,
Yes.
maybe to make it animatronic, because under that skin would be like a little hollow understructure with little motors and stuff. In this case, we had a skeleton inside the casting. So we floated that. That's what these are for. We floated it with threads. They'd wrap around the mold, tighten into these nuts, and it would hold it suspended.
Oh boy.
And then if you look in the back, we have a pour spout. And we poured liquid gelatin, effects gelatin, so no water, bunch of other chemicals.
I'm just going to bring the camera a little closer so they can see this. Yeah.
So we poured it through here,
Yeah.
and the excess came out of all these little holes. That's how we know it filled in each of these areas,
Mhm.
and we didn't get an air bubble. And then when we shot it, we had fake arms holding the baby, and we surrounded it with heat guns. And then we did essentially a time-lapse shot of the gelatin melting off the skeleton, which had some red latex muscle tissue and stuff on it.
Oh, boy.
It was super gross. It was wonderful. This is an effect that is not done very often. It's probably only been done a handful of times over the course of the history of our industry. Why? I don't know. It's super fun. But yeah, and this is another form of aerospace epoxy. This is from a great company called BJB Enterprises down in Tustin, California. And I use a lot of their epoxies.
So hard.
It's probably the hardest epoxy I've ever used. For any material geeks out there, rigid materials are measured on a scale of Shore D up to about 100. I believe this is a 92. This stuff is in the 80s. It's plenty hard, but this stuff is harder.
Now, with some of these pieces that you made, is anything on the wall that is like what's back over there? Is that this right here, the baby? Or...
No, that's actually from a different production.
Really? I'm going to have to show that. Because
you show whatever you like.
This is really, really cool.
That's your arm.
Oh, let's see what my arm looks like, everybody. Make sure I'm putting this back right. I don't want Michael to kill me, you guys. We got witnesses.
You're good.
Okay. All right, this is my arm. Oh, generic male right arm. I'm generic, guys, but this is me.
Well, you've got
just playing.
a nice average-looking arm, so we can use this for other productions.
Yes.
I will also point out, for technical nerds, this is what's referred to as a T-nut. So we actually have the nut embedded in the mold, so we can open and close it without having to turn wing nuts. Oh, and it makes it faster. That's the top half.
And that's the palm of my hand, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the palm of your hand. That's your thumb. So this is that same epoxy. I love using epoxy for molds we're going to run silicone in.
Yeah.
Because we use a lot of what's called platinum silicone. Platinum silicone is very finicky.
Okay.
If it touches something it doesn't like, it will not cure. But epoxy is very inert, so we use a lot of epoxy and fiberglass for my silicone body parts and things of that nature.
This is so cool. I'm like looking at this like...
I love this stuff.
Yeah, I'm very...
It's about a third of this stuff's cost.
Well, hey, there you go. For some of you film producers, you can go this route too.
If you come to us, what we're going to do is we're going to steer you towards the materials we think are both conducive to the project and conducive to the process. Okay. We could have done everything on this project in plaster. It would have been heavy. I don't like heavy.
Yeah.
So I will pay a little bit extra so that whoever has to handle things isn't going to hurt themselves.
Okay.
In some cases, the stuff we made for the project are things I want to keep for a while.
Yeah.
Which is why it says generic. We can use these for other productions.
Right.
And the deal I make with the producers is that they pay a little bit extra to do me a solid, and I give them a little bit of a break on the labor.
Gotcha.
So it all ends up leveling out. You obviously, we didn't need for a short film to use epoxy syntactic dough.
Yeah.
But I want to get a lot of necks out of this, so that's what we did.
Right.
And I bit the bullet on that cost.
Yeah, and I fortunately have a neck that can kind of fit a lot of different styles, right?
Yep. We also did it without any slits or anything in it, so it can be cut for slit throats later. Spin that around.
Spin it around this way.
You know what, that works, as long as it's stable.
Yeah, I want to make sure it doesn't slide. In case we get a little shake, because that does happen in LA. So.
We've only ever had that once in Pasadena the entire time I've lived here. I've been in Pasadena for 15 years.
Yeah.
Only once.
A little shaking.
Really cool.
Yeah, very cool. I bet. Let's go and look over here.
By
like,
yeah,
you want to
whatever you like.
Yeah, let's take a look back here. This is where I'm taking some of the mixing and some of the other magic takes.
So that's how the foam latex happens.
Okay.
When we do a foam latex appliance or animatronic skin, we whip the raw components in a mixer. For small batches, we use something like this. For like a big creature suit, we'll use a big sort of bakery size mixer that can do 60 quarts or 40 quarts or whatever. The suit that I ran for Grimm, I was brought in on, not Grimm, on Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
We were brought in to run a creature suit, and we used 4 20-quart Hobart mixers. So it took almost 20 gallons of whipped foam to fill that mold. It's a huge suit. It was really big. It was designed to go on stilts.
Oh boy. How long does that take to make?
They whipped it up really fast,
Yeah.
actually. They brought me the molds to run, but I think it was sculpted and molded in maybe a week and a half. TV deadlines.
It's a lot of work.
And then
It's bringing in a nice team of people though to work on it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Foam latex, which is what I was brought in to do, is very much an art form.
Yeah.
It's a science, but because the science is not understood by a lot, it's deemed an art form. It's deemed finicky, like it possesses its own cognizance and it does what it wants. It's not true. It's sensitive to humidity. It's sensitive to temperature. So we, just like when you're making bread, we adjust the ratios of the components to compensate for that. If it's going to be like a 100-degree day, as we get in Southern California, I might come in the morning, or I might, go inside in the air conditioning to run it.
Yeah.
The hotter it is, the less time we have to work with it, and you can only offset that so much. There are things you can add. There are things you can reduce.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a limit, I would say, of comfort. So, in the case of your piece, it was really hot that week, so we ran everything early in the morning. It gets run, put in the mold, compressed, and then once it gels, once it sort of becomes stable, it goes in my oven over here, which we can open up if you like.
This is not an easy bake oven, people.
It's the same. It's a low temperature oven.
Really? Okay.
In one sense. So we'll go in here and it'll bake, and that'll activate the curing agent, and it gives it the memory. Just like your memory foam mattress, it'll bounce back. If we didn't cook it or expose it to heat or UV for long enough, when you press it, it would hold that shape. Which is obviously not ideal. Foam latex has been in use in the film industry since the 30s. There's a lot of people that believe that the first project it was used on was The Wizard of Oz. However, there's some conjecture that there was another smaller project the year before. And for the life of me, I can't remember the title. It was a more obscure film to today's audience. But it gets baked. For a suit, we might bake a suit for 15 hours.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we're cooking this at low temperatures.
Slow cooking. We're slow cooking this, baby.
That neck was cooked at 145 degrees.
Oh wow, yes, some slow
Very
cooking.
low.
Yeah.
It doesn't eat a lot. I've gone as low as 115.
Yeah.
Lower you go, the longer you cook, kind of like barbecue. If you cook too hot, and this happened in Georgia, I had commissioned an oven to be built by the client.
Yeah.
Gave them specs, and they did not follow them. So instead of a heating element, we got a pancake grill. And that shorted, and it superheated the oven while we were asleep. And it melted the rubber in the molds, and the molds were toast.
Not good.
We saved one of them, and it took hours of scrubbing with high-strength solvents.
Let me take it. Did anybody take personal accountability for their mess up? Or
The answer I got was, this was less expensive and easier to do.
Right.
That is the answer I got. And I said, I'm working for you guys, whatever.
Hey, there's a lovely lady hanging on the wall in here in the studio.
And that goes with the baby.
And the baby, too.
The baby came into the lady.
So we got this baby right here.
That was for a project we did beginning of last year.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's very interesting. And then look at this. That is a handsome arm over there. Man.
That's your arm, right?
That's my arm. You guys see that? I'm going to have to close in a little bit so you can really see.
And as you know, we filled it with different wires and forms so that we could bend it in crazy directions.
Oh, boy. So, I can't wait for you guys to see all the little breaks going on. And what is that creepy, creepy tentacle up there?
Well, that's also from Play It All Night Long. Our illustrious director Quinn wanted a mutated, monstery, 80s style Lovecraftian tentacle. And that's what we gave him.
It's all Lovecraft
Full of
country.
Tumors and sphincters and pustules and all kinds of fun stuff. There's even a little eyeball at the end of it.
That thing ran its arm on me. That was gross.
Well, we have all kinds of fun stuff here. I got these are dentures.
Got dentures.
Prosthetic dentures are like one of my favorite things to make.
Anybody need some teeth?
And these are custom fit. They won't fit anybody.
Ah. Wow.
Which is why they're a display item now.
And is this a jawbone of a what?
That's a cow jawbone, but it's all fake.
Oh, it's fake.
Yep, that's plastic.
Boy, that looks real. All this cool stuff in here. Man, this is really, really cool, everything I'm seeing here. And I'm just like kind of amazed because when I watch movies and I see certain things, I always wonder how you get to this point. And you've taken us on a tour.
Each
Yeah.
one of these was a different journey. This is a really cool technique because this didn't require a mold or a sculpture or anything. We actually took a plastic medical skeleton
Yeah.
and we built up layers of upholstery foam, like the stuff that's in your couch cushions, and wrapped it in medical cotton and latex, and we glued a wig on with this really cool industrial adhesive called 1099 from 3M.
Oh, boy.
And it's all painted with diluted rubber cement and oil paint.
Boy. And this is a burned body, or?
She wasn't burned.
Okay.
She was left in a wall to sort of shrivel up.
Okay.
So mummify. And while we took a little liberty with the texture, the director wanted something a little more dramatic.
Yeah.
Normally when that happens, while you do get a little bit of shriveling,
Yeah.
you get a lot of constriction, and he really wanted something that would pop more on camera in low light.
Yes.
So we amped up the texture a bit for that suspension of disbelief factor.
Now, I see something back here that I didn't see all these times I've been here. What is this baby right here in the corner?
This is Pumpkinstein.
Ah.
Pumpkinstein's a bit of a mystery. I do not know who the artist is. This sort of appeared here while I was out of town many years ago.
Okay.
So we don't know who the artist is. I just keep it around because he looks cool. I might paint him one of these days. I might not.
Boy, this is all pretty exciting here. Now, because I know I've been taking up a lot of your time today, but if somebody wants to get in contact with you as far as to contract with you to work on their project, what do they need to do? What steps?
What steps?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants to get in contact with me,
We'll get ready to help you guys real quick.
they can hop on the old mobile device.
Still, we use the cell phone, baby.
You know, I use my computer so much less these days.
Yes.
We've got the handy dandy website, which is haunteddreamsstudio.com.
Which will show up at the bottom of the screen.
We have my Instagram, which is also
Haunted Dreams Studios. At Haunted Dreams. Underscore.
haunted_dreams_studio.
You hear that? At haunted_dreams_studios.
Right.
On IG.
That's right. And on Facebook, I'm just under my name, Michael Dinetz. I use Facebook the most. I like how Facebook is all integrated.
Yeah.
I think I've got a LinkedIn profile somewhere for the handful of people that use LinkedIn. I'm just going to switch you over to Facebook. You can call if you're old-fashioned, which I am, 323-388-9537.
Which is on your screen right now.
Call or text, I suppose.
Yeah.
Got to accommodate all different levels of technological proficiency. You know, it's really interesting talking with prospective clients because I think there's a lot of people that get intimidated. The number of people I've had call up and say, "Oh, I don't think we can afford you," and I was like, "Well, you don't know what it costs."
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about it? You know, I still do, you know, tiny budget shorts. I work on, you know, really, really big stuff. I work on stuff in the middle. You know, the sweet spot is in the middle. You know, the sort of $1 million to $5 million movies.
Yeah.
I think that it's a really interesting space because in that space with the right script, you have a lot more creative freedom than a studio film, but you're not dealing with the budget constraints typically, although I could tell a couple of stories. The budget constraints of like a 200K movie.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, I've worked on 200K movies where we got a third of the budget for our department. What I cannot stress enough is if something costs and you want it, it doesn't matter the percentage of your budget. I think there's this idea that any given thing, and the percentages vary, doesn't deserve more than a certain percentage of the budget. And I think that thinking about budgets in percentages is a really antiquated way to budget.
Yeah.
They did that a lot back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and it's just not relevant now.
Okay.
Budgeting, in my view, is start with a screenplay that you can afford. And you have to go through with somebody that knows their numbers. I actually do development work. I do preliminary budgets for people.
You hear that?
And I'm cheap because it's a side business, and my goal is to help you. I got tired of watching people just make avoidable mistakes.
Yeah.
And get halfway through a project and run out of money.
I'm glad I know that now.
It's like watching somebody about to be hit by a car and knowing you can't stop it. And I got fed up and I said, look, I'm going to try to help people I can. I know what things cost. I've taken my time to learn. I think it's very easy for even a fledgling producer to start calling around to like the rental houses, call it Quixote and ask what they want for a G&E package. And that's easy enough to do. Call up Avon and ask what a truck rental is going to cost you. You know that you're... I love PAs. They are the lowest paid people on the movie.
Yeah.
You're going to pay your PA minimum wage on a tiny budget movie.
Yes.
Do not have people work for free. The whole volunteer thing, one, it's illegal.
Yeah.
We should very clearly understand this is the nice little disclaimer message.
Yes.
If you tell somebody when to be at work, when to go home, how to do their job, when to take a meal break, they're your employee under federal law, provided y'all are in the States.
Yes.
And my understanding is Canada and the UK are somewhat similar. So all of you 1099 in your crew, you're taking a risk with your project.
Yeah.
Statute of limitations in most states, I think, is about 3 years.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be paying into Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, and all that stuff.
SAG pensions.
That's right. If it's SAG, the unions have their own requirements. But for all those people out there that are like, oh, it's not a union project, doesn't matter. The union rules are built on the backbone of federal and state labor laws. They are not their own institution in that regard. That's important to me. It's something I fight for. Yes, you're on a budget. You're not going to be able to pay everybody a tier 3 union rate on every project. I'm a big advocate for non-union lower budget productions.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that, as long as people are treated fairly.
That's it.
So we go back to that. We know that certain people are going to get something. Camera department, Genie, they're a rate. They're a day rate or an hourly, and they're on set. So we know how many days we're shooting. That's, again, relatively easy to calculate.
Gotcha.
What ends up happening is you get to makeup effects, costume, sometimes specialty costume for those people that need like an Iron Man suit or whatever.
Yeah.
The art department, which, is the term many of us use to cover props, set deck, greens, scenic, specialty props, all that stuff, graphics, signage. This is all under the header of the production designer. This is the world that they build. And while in the union world there's different unions that encompass those different aspects, the art department is not something productions are... those guys get screwed left, right, and center. Productions just don't know how to deal with them. But the biggest twist that you'll find in a lot of these departments is they all have one thing in common. A lot of them require prep work.
Gotcha.
So one production doesn't know how many prep days to allocate to build a set or make a space gun or make a creature suit or make a 16th century French dress or whatever the case may be. They don't even know that your standardized makeup department and costume department need time to get measurements and color match and color
You
test.
gotta have people come for fittings, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, for the more elaborate stuff.
Yeah.
They don't know that you need doubles and triples when you're doing something messy on costume. Blood, mud, slime, whatever. All of this is a mystery. So what happens is you either have decided on a total amount of your budget and you start chipping away at it. Whatever's left gets arbitrarily divided amongst these departments, which is why I get calls asking for $5,000 werewolf suits. Or they take a step in the right direction. They call somebody whom they trust or who was referred, and they ask for a quote.
Gotcha.
Now, this is where things go a little sideways, and I'm going to sort of segue back to my own department here to illustrate. We talked about how not every vendor is a math wizard.
Yes.
So if you're not going to the big guys, and you're not coming to me because we've established that I take the business side of this very seriously, and I don't screw around with the numbers, and I do budget conservatively, and I do have a heavy focus on proper process. Not everybody does that. So if you're not dealing with a vendor like that, the number you get is usually useless. It's usually based on shortcuts. It's usually arbitrary. You'd be amazed how many times they forget to put something in. Like I once dealt with an artist who forgot to put in all their disposables, and on a larger build that came to about $5,000.
Because you have to responsibly dispose, right?
No, I didn't know
you
do
can
with that.
you go
It's
to
just
the
we were
trash.
going through shitloads of buckets.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
mixing sticks.
Okay, so there's no environmental responsibilities.
Once they're covered in non-environmentally friendly materials, they pretty much go to a landfill.
Okay.
That is one of the negative aspects of our business.
Okay, all right.
But they didn't budget any of that, and it added up. So, the number of times I had somebody come to, well, we had somebody quote us, and I said, well, number one, why didn't you hire them?
Yeah.
That's always the initial question in my mind. But number two, I'm sorry, these numbers are not realistic. And I got low overhead. My overhead isn't huge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not K&B or Legacy. I don't have like 30,000 square feet that I have to worry about. I don't have payroll going on when I don't have a project.
Yeah.
But there's a limit.
Yeah.
And this so applies to those other departments too. And, with the art department, it's less of an in-house operation. There's so many little side vendors you're going to. You're going to go to ISS to rent a bunch of props or commission something from SAT. You're going to a scene shop to have a bunch of flats built, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And none of this is something that the average producer, and sadly, even veteran line producers, have a real handle on. So they're starting out with insufficient numbers.
Okay.
And then it just becomes a slippery downhill slope from that.
Snowball effect. And
Absolutely. It's a huge snowball effect.
Avalanche then.
And then you're stuck.
Yeah.
And this is why independent film has a 90% rate of failure, because you end up with a movie that people don't want to watch. I've listened. I don't know what it is about sound guys. I've never heard people complain on the forums like sound guys do. They think like every project the sound guy should get $1,500 a day. I'm like, that's lovely. It's not going to happen. Like, meanwhile, we're talking about like a SAG modified low project, and the actors are getting $300 a day or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I forget what it's up to. It might be close to 4 now.
Yeah. It's still not that much.
Well, not compared to the sound guy that wants $1,500 a day.
Yeah.
And they're always cocky and they're like, well, we're the second most important department. I was like, you can have great sound, phenomenal cinematography, and an underdressed set is going to ruin all of that.
Yeah. Everybody's important.
Everybody contributes.
Yes.
All of these departments should have equal rights as far as their budget. And look, there's a finite amount of money on a movie.
Yeah.
And we go back to that selfishness factor on the part of production. What's more important? Do you do justice to the script that you either spent money to acquire or spent time to create? Or do you have this sense of fear that the movie might never get made, and you view that as the determining factor? You know what? If the movie doesn't get made badly, because it didn't get made, I don't think that's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the travesty. I think trying to make a $1 million movie for $50,000 is the travesty.
Yeah, that's when it's bad.
And it's very hard to get the people at the top of the totem pole to feel that logic. It doesn't click.
Got you.
It's driven by fear and selfishness. The number, we're not even going to really go down the rabbit hole of all of the bullshit that we get told. It's great exposure. Oh, it's going to be wonderful for your portfolio. No, it's not. If I have to cut every corner in the book, it's not going to be great for my portfolio.
No.
That exposure is negative
It's
exposure.
going to look like trash.
And it completely backfires.
Yes.
But then we go to the psychology of it, right? So if you're at the top of the totem pole, you have to protect yourself mentally or you're going to have a breakdown.
Yes.
So subconsciously, you're now looking at your project unobjectively. You're looking at it through rose-colored lenses. And in your mind, negativity is the enemy. And I'm sorry, sometimes negativity is what saves you.
Yeah.
The number of people I've had say, well, we can't have you on our project because you're too negative and we need creative problem solvers. I'm like, there's a lot of creative solutions out there.
Yeah.
They can't solve every problem. I've had a lot of beginners in my field or people that have been in it for a while and haven't hit the wall yet.
Yes.
And they'll say, oh, well, you're just too negative. We got to be creative. We got to give production what they want. And I said, you're going to hit a day when you're on set or you're approached for a build and there isn't enough time. Sometimes time is more important than money. Money's a big factor. Where the only solution to the problem is either more time, more money, or both. And since you don't have that, there is no solution. Or there's no acceptable solution. Right. There's no way to give the production what they want on the budget they have with the time allotted. And until you hit that wall, if you're unwilling to take solid advice, you will not learn that lesson. And it's painful to me how many artists want to view somebody trying to teach them that lesson as being negative or naysayers or jaded or not good enough. The number of times I've been called by, I don't like to use the term lesser artists, but I'm struggling at the moment for an alternative term.
Or,
as being overpriced.
Yeah.
As being negative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm realistic.
Yes. You have to be. You have to look at the...
I'm devil's advocate.
Yeah, there's a matter of fact things.
I'm going to sit here and I'm going to worry about Murphy's Law. Because I know that if I do that, I stand the absolute highest likelihood of giving my client what they want.
Yes. Man, Michael, you answered a lot of the questions I had coming here because I've learned to listen a lot more than I talk when I do interviews because I was like, a lot of my questions get answered just from listening.
Just from us rambling?
Yeah, just talking. That's how a lot of times you get. I remember my grandmother, mom, dad, always just be quiet. Learn to be quiet and listen. You'll learn a lot more. We got one mouth, 2 ears, right? But
you know who else is quiet? Pickles.
Yeah, Pickles is like, man, you're infringing on my time.
Pickles is a good listener.
But one question I had too is, if you had to talk to a younger Michael, 18 years ago, entering into this industry, what you've learned in 18 years of this, what piece of advice would you tell Michael to be like, get ready?
We've covered a lot of it.
Yeah.
Quite
if you was to sum it up and like,
it would probably be minutia bits for contracts. Be less trusting.
Okay.
And that's really sad. And I hate that we live in a world where I have to say that.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things that I've observed is that not everybody's out to get you.
Yeah.
That a lot of the places where you get screwed are where people were trying to do the right thing and came up short. There's nefarious people in this industry. There's con artists.
Yeah.
There's people whose whole business model is modeled off stiffing people on paychecks or 1099ing at ridiculously low rates. There's a company who I won't name that's Los Angeles based that does about 30 movies a year.
try to stay below that $600 pay, so they don't have to pay taxes or anything.
They'll
Yeah.
1099 you.
Yeah,
You'll get $75, maybe $100 a day. I'm sure it's gone up a little.
yeah,
When I got started, it was about 50 to 75.
yeah,
Well below minimum wage.
yes,
They'll ride you hard. They'll shoot the movie in 2 weeks. They will basically make you produce a certain level of garbage. Their movies are borderline unwatchable. They're definitely, I think, gave birth to the "it's so bad, it's entertaining" market. The only positive to come out of that is if you can roll with that, you'll build a resume fast.
yes.
I've never really settled on if I believe that was worth the cost. I think some people have decided it is.
Yeah,
I think some people got their union days that way, and it was worth it to them. It's hard. I don't know that there's always clear-cut answers. Something I would tell my younger self, watch who you hire.
okay.
I've had a couple people that worked for me that were some of the biggest regrets of my career. That having them work for me has resulted in situations I wish weren't in existence.
It's the whole thing: hire slow, fire fast, whatever.
Hire the right people.
Yeah, hire the right people. Yeah.
You can't win firing people.
No, because somebody's always going to have they did me wrong. They did this
The
story.
level of gossip in this industry, the level of selfishness, the level of of stepping on people, and
Yeah.
cutthroatness, and the level of delusion on the part of the people that do it. How somehow they're the victim is really frustrating.
Yeah.
I think that we should probably touch on the Me Too movement and the level of unequal treatment and sexual harassment that occurs in this industry. It's something that really bothers me.
Yeah.
I make it a big point to not allow that here.
Yes.
Ironically, seeing people do the same thing and get accused of it is very frustrating. I think that you create that boy who cried wolf syndrome,
Yeah.
where the victims are now losing their credibility because of the people that decided this was their revenge tactic.
Mm.
I've seen it happen to a few close friends, and the ones who made the unfortunate mistake of teaching long term
Yeah.
at some of the makeup schools, and you get one 18-year-old student who doesn't like the critique they got, and boom, the teacher sexually harassed them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this doesn't happen.
Right.
What I'm saying is the people that fabricate it are hurting the people that it's happening to.
Gotcha.
And that's very unfortunate.
It is.
I think the same thing happens when we're talking about hypothetical hostile work environments.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of people in this industry that really struggle with being told they did something wrong,
Mhm.
with being called out on a mistake.
Yeah.
And
Lack of personal accountability.
at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if you screw up, I'm going to tell you,
Yeah.
because my name's on the work that goes out the door.
Right.
And, there's people I've bent over backwards to help. I gave multiple opportunities to and got screwed at every turn. For all the people that's, that have called me an asshole over the years, I'm a bleeding heart.
Yeah.
I want to help people.
I felt that from you when I first met you. I was like, he's a really good dude, and works extremely hard. But I was like, man, I like working with him. I really felt that. I felt like when I came in here and you had me all plastered up and everything, I was like, he's a good
You
dude.
wouldn't have thought that if we left you plastered up.
Yeah, I might have changed. I have one more thing. We've talked about some of the challenges that people experience. What would you say is one of the most beautiful things about working in the industry and doing what you do?
Well,
And the harp starts playing.
extra for that part.
Yeah.
There's a lot of aspects.
Yeah.
I think more so on the beauty makeup side, the ability to have people realize how beautiful they are,
Yeah.
is great. Working with producers and directors and actors to bring characters to life is really valuable. The number of times you'll talk to an actor that has to perform in heavy makeup that likes that,
Yeah.
they'll tell you the moment those prosthetics are on, they feel the character,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't feel them before. and that's very rewarding. Simultaneously, it really sucks when you have an actor that hates being in makeup, and somehow that's who got cast, and production was like, suck it up. If you're going to cast an actor that has to be in heavy makeup, they have to be able to embrace that makeup, or all it's going to do is fight them.
Okay.
That's very important. There's a lot of prima donnas in this industry that are like, ooh, I don't want to wear rubber, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Don't audition for that role.
It's simple.
Easy. So I love bringing other people's visions to life. You know, there's a sort of this long-running trend of makeup effects professionals wanting to be film directors. That is not me.
Okay.
I have no desire to direct a movie. I don't really traditionally produce. I love the development work. I love trying to help people get their projects off the ground. But I have no desire to run the logistical side of a production. It's not what brings me joy. If we're going to go the whole Marie Kondo route, do what brings you joy. I love being in the background, creating things with my hands. I love the idea that you can take a lump of clay and turn it into that.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Or the tentacle here. I mean, or even your neck appliance. I love the idea of the collaboration that comes with that. Yeah, sometimes I'm here by myself, hammering away at something, and sometimes it's something really big, and there's a bunch of people here. And I love all of that. I like the, when it's not backstabby, I like the camaraderie of it. I like... That's why I don't understand the backstabbiness. A lot of us were misfits. A lot of us moved out here to find a community that felt like we did. And I get it. The industry's oversaturated. I can definitely say, for my part, the makeup effects field hit a tipping point in the very, very late 90s, early 2000s, where the makeup schools, of which there are actually fewer now, partially thanks to COVID and a few other factors, we're pumping out far more people than this industry could absorb. I would say before COVID, the success rate if somebody wanted to work in a workshop or work on set, probably workshop less than 1%, 0.25% on a good year. On set, maybe 5 if you were lucky that year. And I feel like what started out as a tool to help people really shot them in the foot. And their businesses, what's the number one rule of business, right? Stay in business. I get it. Business first, education second. People get, their knickers in a twist over that. But at the end of the day, as with any business, the goal is to make money. Now, obviously, the goal should not be to screw people over
while making money.
Yes. But some byproducts are unforeseen. I think the odds have gotten a little better in recent years because of all of the closures. And that's great, I guess. It sucks that people went out of business. Maybe it was the best for the industry, but it still sucks for them. I certainly have my issues with how makeup education is handled. Those issues vary from school to school. I don't think most of them will change because there's limited incentive to change them. And that's unfortunate. But once again, we've addressed that is what that is. I think that there are a lot of people that feel that the cutthroatness is justified, in order to stay afloat. I think it's also unfortunate a lot of people take typically 3 years to find out they're not cut out for the industry. And during that 3 years, they're taking work away from the rest of us, which is unfortunate. I don't know that that'll ever change.
Because it's just part of the process. Some people are going to try it. And
I think that between social media response and teacher response, that critique is not nearly as harsh as it could be. And because of that, because of the alternative to that reinforcement, we have people that don't know that their work is not up to par and have been convinced that it is. And you got 20 people telling you that. One person comes along with the landscaper outside. One person comes along.
Somebody out there thinks they're pretty cool.
That's right.
Okay.
Flipping my weeds. one person comes along and they're like, hey, all those other people are wrong. Well, for what reason would you believe the one person? So that sort of works against people today.
Yeah.
Everybody in social media is like, wow, that's amazing. And, myself or somebody else comes along and says, hey, it's not, and we're going to try to offer you solutions. Like, you can do this, this, and this, but you cannot produce quality commercial art. I have to stress, this is a commercial art form. This is not fine arts.
Yes.
You cannot produce quality commercial art if you don't know where you stand. I know I can't do everything. I hate punching hair. I bring people in for that. I'm not a fan of that. It makes me want to murder people. And that's after I get cross-eyed. It is just not the thing I love doing. Can I do it? Yes.
Yeah.
Will it take 4 times longer than somebody that's really good at it? Yes. And will I hate myself while doing it? Yes. That's important.
Yeah.
A big thing, and I see this less in LA and more in like tiny markets around the country, you have to recognize when you can't do the job on yourself. Like, you gotta recognize you can't build a whole creature suit on your own.
Yeah.
People take these jobs and they're like, well, this is the situation where I live, so you gotta make it work. Like, you should not do a life cast by yourself. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
We did a net cast on you and a handful of others, but what we didn't do is do a facial or head cast where everything but your nostrils are covered.
Yeah.
There's real safety factors.
Yeah, you covered the nostrils. The person could suffocate, right?
Which actually happened to me on my very first life cast that somebody cast me way back in 2000.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, that was dealt with, and I'm still here.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that it's real. Like,
Yeah.
you don't put straws in the nose because they can cause nosebleeds. They also distort the cast, so you're sort of like the worst of all worlds. There's so many factors. Like, I get it, limited personnel, limited capable personnel. Nobody's forcing you to be an effects artist.
Yeah.
Nobody's forcing you to work on that budget. It's really interesting. There's a workshop in New York, Prosthetic Renaissance, headed up by Mike Marino and Mike Fontaine, who are phenomenally talented. For the last few years, they've handled Heidi Klum's Halloween costume.
Oh, really?
Yes, they just did the big worm thing. They fly people in. They'll fly in mold makers and sculptors from LA and various other places. And it goes in the budget.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do this job. These people are not here. There's nobody here that can do what we want. It goes in the budget. We got to get them. And if you're going to hire them, you accept that those airline tickets and that housing is a factor.
It's part of the budget.
It's part of the budget.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to pay that, you hire somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Not a single one of us is the right person for every job.
Right.
And that's fine. Rick Baker would tell you that's why he retired. Rick had like a 60,000 square foot workshop on San Fernando Road in Glendale.
Yeah.
And I still get sad driving by it and seeing that it's now a storage facility. Like, it's one of those,
Yeah, that big old U-store type thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
I know exactly where it's at.
and it makes me sad. Other people are like, don't be sad. Rick is probably doing more in his retirement than most of us do professionally, which is equally funny and awesome. And I want to be him someday. Doing that.
You hear that, Rick? I hope you're listening.
In my late 60s and 70s, I can only dream to be as cool as Rick Baker. Rick Baker, I believe, is the only person in the history of our industry, with the exception of one film, to never pursue a project. They all landed in his lap. Nobody else in the industry that I know of could say that, dead or alive.
I was going to say, that's pretty powerful.
The project he went after was The Wolfman. Rick was a huge Universal Monsters fan.
Yeah.
So my understanding is he went and actually reached out to the studio and was like, I want this movie. What's it going to take?
Yeah.
But everything else he ever got, everything ranging from Schlock to American Werewolf in London, Coming to America, even a bunch of movies he didn't end up doing. He did the earliest iteration of E.T. when it was, what was the name of the... I keep wanting to say it was the Night Flyer, but I don't think that was right. Night Skies, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Night Skies, I've heard of Night Skies.
Okay, so that was what E.T. was supposed to be, and then it became more family-friendly and went to Carlo Rambaldi. But they did a lot of cool stuff at Rick's, which if you get his book, you can see.
Okay.
Rick has always been the person that I look up to the most. There's other people in this industry, both older and newer. We can rattle off a bunch of names. I'm a huge fan of Justin Raleigh. Justin was one of my teachers a million years ago in makeup school back when he still taught. He runs a company called Fractured Effects now, and they do phenomenal work. Kristen Tinsley, so inventive. Steve Johnson, for all of his faults, so was referred to as the bad boy makeup effects. Steve Johnson had this phenomenal style. We actually took some inspiration from him on this. He would do this on some of his projects. He would just do this really outlandish stuff that I love so much. For a while, before he had his own shop, he headed up Boss Films effects shop. Boss Films, produced movies. They did visual effects. They had practical effects. When they were doing makeup effects under their umbrella, Steve ran their makeup effects shop, and that's where he did Ghostbusters, Big Trouble in Little China, handful of others. There's so many people. There's individual artists that don't have their own workshop, just sculptors like Mitch Devane and Joey Orozco, whose work is phenomenal, Richie Alonso. There's painters, people like Tim Gore and the late Rich Mayberry, who just passed a few weeks ago. There's, technical people, mold makers, guys like one of my all-time favorites, Tim Heising.
Yeah.
People like Gary Yee and Damian Fisher, Carl Lyon, who has been the mold supervisor at Vince Van Dyke's since its inception, who does these really clean, sharp, technical molds.
Yeah.
All I can say is a bad mold makes everybody else's job harder.
On that note, right there, you can be a bad mold in a lot of ways. But Michael, I do want to thank you for taking some time and just educating me and even our viewers and listeners more on this part of the industry that is so critical. And when we watch these movies and TV shows, to me, it makes it more impactful to me as somebody who had to sit under prosthetics for a second and not fully. I don't think I was in full prosthetic, just neck.
No, you were not buried in rubber.
Not buried in rubber, but just to get the feel of the commitment it takes to, one, you have to be patient and let the artists do their work, and you trust the artists to do their work. Filmmakers out there, you guys make sure you are preparing yourself. You can call my man Michael, and he can help you get your budget tight. Also too, but make sure you consult with somebody so you're doing things the right way. This is what my show is about. It's about really producing in the right way. Whatever you produce, it's not necessarily in this industry.
As a side thing, I do full line item budget, so it's not just my department. I will tell you what it's going to cost to do your movie, cover your bases legally, make sure you're not hamstringing your departments. It may not always be the number you want. But I've said for years, the best line producers, and I do not consider myself a line producer, they do so much more than paperwork. The best line producers are the people that will argue with you. They will say, I get that you can get your hands on $500,000, but this is a $1.2 million movie.
So we got to shave some stuff here.
Well, and you can, but that's where you have the conversation. If you shave too much, it's no longer the movie you wanted to make. And at that point, are you just kidding yourself and you're not going to make a return on it? So that's the other thing. You're privately funding a movie.
You want to make it.
Your investor,
this is not a charity.
Your investor expects a return. We go back to that 90% failure rate.
Yeah.
It's because somebody convinced themselves that and it's that selfishness again. We got to make the movie.
Yeah.
So we're going to start shaving stuff. The best story I could ever tell is I did an action movie when I was working in Hong Kong and China. And the original script was not going to win any Academy Awards.
Yeah.
But it would have been a perfectly entertaining action movie, a great movie to put on the weekend. And they cut so much stuff. I believe personally they probably needed about $2.5 million US. When it was all said and done, between equity favors and hard cash, they had about $1.2 million, $1.3 million.
Yeah.
They cut out, the fight in the ancient temple. They cut out ziplining from helicopters, fights on moving trains. cars chasing trains, half the fight sequences. They cut out all the stuff and got a really dull movie that I think to this day has made less than $500,000.
Boy.
And I've seen it time and again. You can cut everything you want and make a movie. The question is, do you want to make a movie or do you want to make this movie?
I love that question.
And how badly do you want to do right by your investor? Because you can throw your hands up in the air when it loses money and say, well, that's the film industry. Or you can say, there's a solid chance this was my fault. And if you do it after the fact, you learned a lesson, but that's about all that came out of it, and you pissed a bunch of people off.
And then you can mess up when you want to create something else. You're hurting other people who may want to come to this investor, because then the next person comes
that's
to that
exactly
investor,
right.
they're looking at them like,
the mistakes of those that came before you are both held against you and others.
Yeah.
And that's why it's harder to get an independent investment today than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So I started taking online and budgeting, pitch decks, generalized consulting, helping people with documents they already made in those regards. My goal here is to find a cost-effective way, because development comes out of your pocket.
Yeah.
Development is not financed by the investor unless you find a development investor, and they are rare. They do exist, but they are rare.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you either set yourself out on the right path or the wrong path. Proper development is so important, and because it's one of my pet peeves, development is not pre-production. If you are not funded, you are not in pre-production unless you're literally funding it yourself and piecemealing pre-production.
Got it.
Pre-production is the money came in, we're hiring the people that have to do prep work.
Yes.
We're hiring the set builders and the makeup effects people and the previs people for the visual effects department and, the people that have to make all the custom costumes and all of that stuff. All of that is pre-production. Location scouting, that's pre-production. When you're trying to figure out what stuff costs, when you're building your documents to try to pitch to people, that's development. And development is your foundation. If you do it wrong, the whole project eventually crumbles, even if it's after you make it all the way through post.
And that right there is a mouthful right there.
Let me help you.
Yes.
Rodney Damon,
thank you guys
for
for
listening and watching the Produce Your Own Life podcast with Rodney Damon Collins. Be sure to rate, like, subscribe, and share on all podcast and social media platforms. If you have questions or would like to be a guest on the show, feel free to reach out to us anytime at produceyourownlifetv@gmail.com. Remember, life is a script. It's time to write your story. Until next time, produce your own life.